I was sitting in a cafe with some of my former high school friends and girlfriends, reminiscing about the past. I remembered Valentina, who was the most imaginative woman I'd ever met. I remembered Nicole, who was the most imaginative. But they told me that Nicole had been caught in a bad story and was in the hospital. I hadn't been to my native country for a long time. I went away to study at the institute and never came back. Family, work. My mother used to come and visit me. But 7 years later she came to her native village. And immediately such news. No one had ever written to me about Nicole. I remembered Nicole telling us a story about a bad man who was rumored to be in touch with the dark forces. The man lived an unsociable life, communicating with few people. But then at the end of the 70s girls started disappearing, and everyone thought it was him. And when the police did nothing, people took matters into their own hands. Anyway, that man disappeared too. Everyone said that he had gone away. But a lot of people said the other version. But the disappearances didn't seem to stop. I don't know who was the first to tell about it, but people in the village began to say that if a girl or a woman called that man 3 times to visit her, and even called him by name, he would appear even from beyond the world and take him with him. I remember we were terribly afraid. Besides, Nicole said his name. But as a child no one ever dared to call him to visit. When I started talking about our school friend, everyone got quiet all at once. "She's in the nut house because of that story," said someone at the table reluctantly. She said she invited him to visit, and he came. But when she saw him she went crazy. And he did not have time to take her away. Her relatives ran to the noise. In the evening, lying on my bed at home, I was still thinking about Nicole. Of course, I did not believe in such tales, and the girls did not believe it either. But none of them dared to double-check her words. But I was literally bursting with excitement. I considered myself a long-time urban and did not believe in children's horror stories. So I called him for a visit. Unexpectedly for myself, I called him by name and invited him to my place 3 times. I myself was lying in the dark, and it was scary and fun at the same time. It seems that I am small again. I hear the clock in the next room ticking. My mother was asleep there. Well, what can be the worst that can happen? And if anyone comes, the dog sleeps at my feet, a huge shepherd dog. I trained him to sleep with me since childhood, although my mother scolded. And while I was thinking, peering anxiously into the darkness, suddenly I felt Billy, who had been sleeping soundlessly up until then, whimper and lifted his muzzle from his paws. He looks intently into the corridor, and I feel that the dog is trembling like an autumn leaf. Billy's trembling on the bed is transmitted to me. I stare into the corridor, and I feel as if someone is there. But I realize that I only imagined it because it was all black without any shade. And then I heard a distinct slap, as if someone had slapped Billy on the scruff of the neck with the palm of their hand. The dog whimpered and rushed off the bed. I threw back the blanket, too, wanting to run to my mother. I felt my hair being grabbed from behind me and tugged. "You're coming with me," I distinctly heard a barely audible whisper behind me. I shrieked, and turned around and saw a man in a raincoat, tall, with his head against the ceiling, and still he was cramped. I didn't have time to make out his face. My mother ran in and turned on the light. There was no one in the room. I had the feeling I was imagining things. The next night he came again, making me doubt that the world was real. I gathered my things that night, asked my mother's forgiveness, and left the village. When I came to town, it never happened again. I decided not to return to our town. I'm afraid I won't come back from there. That's how I keep my word.
Thank you for watching and supporting me. Subscribe to the channel, there will be many more interesting things.